When I was in high school, I was the kid that wore suits to class, and after receiving my 13th swirly, I received a hard lesson about modesty. Presentation isn't everything. It's far more impressive to keep attention than it is to catch it. Richard Feynman gave lectures in the clothes he got out of bed in because the dude was so goddamn interesting that people would listen to him ramble even if they had to sit on chairs made out of cactus. Cacti. These are the games I love. Modest, stripped back, tight, focused, no fluff, no bullshit. Board game bullshit shows up in many capacities. Boxes the size of Gibraltar. 7 hours of setup that leave you hunched over the table like a goddamn candy cane. Tons of overhead, guaranteeing you'll miss at least 8 rules each round. 100 chipboards of components that took an entire rainforest to manufacture, and will probably take a century to pop them all out. Muddy mechanics that amalgamate the game's fluidity and desperately need to be taken out back in old Yellard. Depending on the severity of the bullshit, none of these things are an immediate death sentence for a game on their own, and can even be ignored if necessary for other more important aspects, but they are still bullshit, and they do still smell bad. Ask anyone that's had a bad day at the ass end of a cow, and they'll tell you even in small quantities the stench of bullshit is difficult to mask. So I want to know what cologne Race for the Galaxy is wearing, because it smells like grandma's cookies at Christmas time. Race for the Galaxy is a modest little game and a tiny little... Race for the Galaxy is a modest little game and a tiny little box, but it packs a punch like Mike Tyson. You play as the architect of a spacefaring civilization trying to build an intergalactic network of commerce, culture, conquest, and science. It's a card game, and the cards represent planets to colonize, technologies to discover, and people with guns that you can pay to shoot at things. Each player has a hand of these playable cards, but they also have a separate hand of action cards that are identical amongst everyone. At the beginning of each round, each player secretly chooses one action card, they reveal them simultaneously, and then you resolve them in order. You get a little bonus when you take the action you played, but any player is allowed to take any action played by anyone else. So, anticipating what your friends are going to do and riding their coattails is hugely beneficial. These actions will help you collect and play cards, produce and sell goods, and ultimately rake in gallons of victory point chips. Once someone has placed their 12th, really? 12th? Are you kidding me? 12th. Once someone has played their 12th card... Once someone has placed their 12th card or raked in the last victory point chip, final scores are calculated and the highest number wins. With only a deck of cards and some cardboard victory points, Race for the Galaxy produces a wealth of interesting decisions, a game loop that'll send you to rehab, and an impressively immersive experience. In order to play cards, you need to pay their cost. But since there's no currency, what do you pay with? Don't worry, Race for the Galaxy isn't going to tarnish its reputation by soliciting any sexual favors from you. Instead, you pay for cards with cards! You discard from your hand to pay for the cards you play. Keep in mind your hand limit's only 10, and since it's going to be filled with excellent options left to right all the time, you're frequently going to feel like a 6-year-old at the toy aisle at Walmart when your mom tells you can only pick one thing to bring home. Some cards have prerequisites too, but holding on to them, waiting for the turn that you can play them, passing up obscene amounts of juicy opportunities in the meantime is going to give you a lovely inefficiency aneurysm. Most cards are meant to have your mouth watering by design. Just like dating, the key is to develop a keen sense of what you want so you can find your diamond in a sea full of plastic amethyst. And also, just like dating, sometimes those two things are difficult to tell apart. Cards you play will do all sorts of things for you. They'll improve actions, reduce costs, get you victory points, and produce goods. And that last one's interesting for 2 reasons. 1, it helps your civilization feel like its own entity because of the next reason, which is that it's the only area of the game where players are able to directly screw each other over. One of the actions you can play is Consume, which forces every player to use all of the goods that they can. Using goods is inherently good because it gets you victory points, but oftentimes you'll have multiple ways to spend goods, with different benefits for each, some requiring multiple goods to use. So when your friend plays Consume when you're sitting on one lowly barrel of space salmon, you're going to be desperately wishing you refined your trade network after you finish bashing them over the head. Race for the Galaxy kicks ass, but don't sit down just yet because it's still got one more boot for your bottom, and that's its beautiful lack of bullshit. Card games are excellent at representing a lot with a little, and since Race for the Galaxy uses its cards as both commodities and currency as well as their intended purpose, it's as wasteful as Bear Grylls drinking his own piss. It's a brilliant and creative way of using the components they had to their fullest, which is indicative of the mentality that went into the design of Race for the Galaxy, making the most of what you have. As a result, the game is a breeze to set up, lightning to play, and has draw me like one of your French girls energy for how badly it makes you want to play it again. I'm so sorry. Hail Mary full of grace. There's nothing here that doesn't need to be here. There's no unnecessary or fiddly mechanics. None of the action cards are better than any of the other ones. It just depends on what you want to do. And what you want to do is entirely up to you, because all paths to victory are equally viable. The flavoring is good too because it doesn't get in the way. It's strictly there to be functional and make the game easier to understand. If you've ever played Race for the Galaxy, I know what you're probably saying right now. Easy to understand? Arnold Schwarzenegger after 40 shots of absinthe is easier to understand. Fair point. Race for the Galaxy's rulebook is notoriously illegible and daunting, and yes, that does count as bullshit. It's a consequence of packing such a dense game in a small box. But you know what they say about small packages. Bloated symbology and nitpicky rules are definitely unattractive, but I think the rules are a lot more intuitive than the rulebook lets on, and as for the symbology, it's localized in predictable places, which makes it easier to learn and harder to overlook. Plus, games don't last that long, so a couple practice rounds to get your sea legs will fly by in no time. Fly by like you're racing for the galaxy. Given its size, its lexicon of a rulebook, and its cover that looks like a straight-to-DVD sci-fi movie from the 90s, Race for the Galaxy feels like a game that doesn't care if you play it. It's the opposite of flashy, but not because it doesn't have anything to offer, it just doesn't waste any time trying to convince you that it has anything to offer. It puts that effort into other places. It's more interested in keeping attention than it is catching it. Beneath its baggy sweatshirt, it's hiding a six-pack. You just gotta break it out of the box to see it. With its consent, of course.